Co-chairs, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to start by joining many others in complimenting the President of Iceland for his foresight in pulling us all here together, and his team for their agility in actually getting us all here. Then I would also like to congratulate Iceland for having such a magnificent conference center, and wish the Arctic Circle Assembly and HARPA a very long and prosperous future together. The question I would like to answer, or the two questions I'd like to answer, or try to answer, and then elaborate on a little bit, is why are Arctic fisheries important? And why is FAO interested? Why is the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations interested in Arctic fisheries? And this is the reason. In spite of progress over the decades, there is still around 1 billion people hungry in this world, and in spite of progress, the prevalence is still between 10 and 20%. And in addition to around 1 billion people that are hungry, we have another billion which is suffering from various nutritional deficiencies, and then at least another billion that's suffering from obesity. And all of this invariably goes hand in hand with poverty. And when I'm speaking of poverty in this context, I'm not talking about the relative poverty we so often discuss here in the Nordic countries, but real abject poverty, a real crippling and killing poverty. And fish has an enormous contribution to human nutrition. Around 20% of our animal protein comes from fisheries in general, and a much higher proportion in the low-income food deficit countries. And in the countries which have the lowest rate of animal protein intake, the proportion of fish intake is much higher than elsewhere. In addition to the protein, the various other nutritional elements, the vitamins and minerals, and the omega-3s play a large role in nutrition. And as many of you have heard, Homo sapiens didn't start to think rationally until he moved down to the coast and started eating fish. And in fact, our brain is made out of omega-3 fatty acids. And this drawing of a small pelagic fish, this is a perfect one-day ration of all the nutritional elements that we need. In addition, here we see the value chain. About 12% of the population of the world rely on their livelihoods on fisheries. And the most important food commodity for the developing countries, the most net traded food commodity for the developing countries is fish. If you think of all the coffee, the rice, the beef, and the chicken, fish tops them all. And in the context of FAO's strategic goals, eradicating hunger, eliminating poverty, and sustainable management of and utilization of natural resources, fish is therefore very important, and the Arctic is therefore very important. And we base our Blue Growth Initiative on these facts. But then let's turn to climate change. Climate change is a fact that nobody tries to deny anymore. It has variable effects. It affects the coral reefs, the shellfish, and it is a part of the dead zones that are accumulating in various places of our oceans. But what concerns us is the effects on fish, and fish stocks, and how climate change is affecting their displacement and possible reduction. And this is from the IPCC panel, and this shows you, based on temperature changes from the last decade to the projections to the middle of this century, how fish catches are estimated to change in the world's oceans. The red colors and the yellow colors, they denote reduction. White is neutral, but the green and the blue colors, they denote an increase. This is based on temperatures and sort of derived comfort zones for fish. And you can see from this that fish will be moving from the lower latitudes around the equator to the higher latitudes, particularly to the north more than actually to the south. So the fisheries potential is going to be increasing in the Arctic region and in the subarctic region. What is also a cause for concern, that the conditions for fish in coastal regions are going to deteriorate, and there where the most sensitive fisheries around the equator for the poorest populations, we are going to be facing problems, and we will have to make up for that somewhere else. In the Arctic, we have already seen various changes in major species. I don't want to dwell on this because I believe Johan Sigurðsson will go into greater detail on the various species and how they at the Marine Research Institute here in Iceland have experienced this here in the North Atlantic. But we are seeing these changes elsewhere as well, in the Pacific Ocean as well, both with regards to crabs and mollusks, as well as to mammals. But certainly, this is not all negative. There are opportunities, even commercial opportunities, that are emerging out of this picture. But are we prepared for this? And what are the structures that we use to manage our oceans? The main instruments are, of course, UNCLOS and the UN fish stocks agreements, as well as the FAO Code of Conduct for Responsible Fisheries and the various related instruments. And the main fora for discussion of fisheries management on a global basis is in the UN General Assembly and in the FAO Committee on Fisheries. But in all of this, the primary responsibility is on the sovereign states. They have responsibility for their EEZs, and then in the areas beyond national jurisdiction, they have the responsibility to cooperate according to the various clauses of both UNCLOS and UN fish stocks. And the prime instrument there is the RFMOs, the Regional Fisheries Management Organization. And if we look at the Arctic region, we see that the Arctic region, obviously depending on how we define it, is only partially covered by RFMOs. The pink area is the NEAFC area, the North Atlantic Fisheries Commission, which is the Fisheries Commission which sort of covers this fairly large sliver of the sort of the conventional area beyond the Arctic Circle. NAFO, the Northeast Atlantic Fisheries Commission, also covers a bit of it, but doesn't extend as far north, doesn't actually extend to the pole like the NEAFC area does. And then in the Pacific, the commissions there don't actually reach further than the Bering Strait and not actually in the conventional Arctic. But if you extend the region further south, even into the Aleutians, then they obviously come into play. But then in particular, the species-specific Bering Sea Pollock and halibut organizations. But then also in the Atlantic, we have the ICAT area, the Tuna Commission area, which extends up and beyond the Arctic Circle. And here we see in closer detail the areas that the NEAF controls, and they have actually already prepared strategies on how to react if and when the fisheries move into the more central Arctic. And just to close, a few considerations for sustainable fisheries development in the Arctic. We basically need a more holistic approach, a cross-sectoral approach to this. And that is in 3 areas. It's fisheries, the wider environment, and the communities, or the people. We need to safeguard the environment. We need to ensure sustainable fisheries management in the face of greater uncertainty than we have seen before. And I think we need to look at new ways of managing. We can't be as certain about the future as we have been in the past. There were 20 years ago some good ideas about how to manage the pelagic complex in the North Atlantic on sort of changing the allocation depending on how the distribution was changing with time on a regular basis. I think we need to look at things like that. And in the South Pacific, in the tuna management, the new day scheme there is specifically set up to be prepared to react to changes in the South Pacific, which are predicted to be on the distribution of tuna, the fishing probably moving further to the east, and there are inbuilt flexibility factors to allow the fishing fleets to react to that. I think there are things like that we need to look at in the future. We need to have adaptive actions in the regions. The livelihoods are of immense importance to those that live in the Arctic region. They may not comparatively with the world population be many, but they live in a very sensitive region where they have for thousands of years been in harmony with the environment, which is now changing. And they definitely need support to tackle these changes. But above all, we need new agreements on responsible fisheries, on how we plan and how we plan to develop the fisheries in the Arctic, how the fisheries coexist with other utilizations of the environment, and that we can only do through agreements, and those agreements need to be based on UNCLOS, UN fish stocks, and the FAO Code of Conduct. Thank you very much.